Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 411K, a Secure 2.0 Provisions Grand Impact on Emergency and Retirement Savings, sponsored by Commonwealth. I'm Rebecca Mora, Managing Editor of Custom Content for Plan Advisor, and I'm glad that you could join us today. In this webinar will dive into the impacts of Secure 2.0's $1,000 withdrawal provision on retirement plan engagement, share Plan Advisor and Record Keeper points of view on the implementation and impact of emergency savings benefits, and provide tangible action steps for attendees. Before we get started, I need to let you know that the information and opinions presented here are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or organization. You should contact your investment representative, attorney, accountant, or tax advisor with regard to your individual situation. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Voya or its affiliates. And now I want to get to some housekeeping items before we get started. During the webinar, there will be handouts that you can download. They will be put into the chat feature right before we go to Q&A. You can also submit your questions at any time using the Q&A feature, and we'll address the questions at the end of the webinar. So please put them in the Q&A feature and not in the chat. A recording of the webinar will be online on planadvisor.com under the Events tab by tomorrow morning. And if you want to be notified of more educational and informational content or events, if you haven't already done so, please go to planadvisor.com/registration and sign up for our mailing list. It's free to get on our mailing list. So Nick Maynard, Senior Vice President at Commonwealth, will be moderating the webinar today, and his panelists are Kathleen Kelly, Founding and Managing Partner at Compass Financial Partners, a Marsh & McLennan Agency LLC company, Carrie Schroen, Head of USDC Intermediary Business at BlackRock, and Tom Armstrong, Vice President, Customer Analytics and Insight, and Head of Voya Behavioral Finance Institute for Innovation at Voya Financial. So Nick, I'll hand it over to you now.
Thanks so much, Rebecca, and thanks to everyone for joining us. I couldn't be more excited to be talking with this illustrious panel about something so timely, emergency savings, financial wellness, and retirement security. Since the launch of BlackRock's Emergency Savings Initiative in late 2018, there has been such progress in the broader ecosystem of workplace financial benefits for building up short-term liquidity so that one can shore up their long-term retirement security. There have been a lot of demonstrations, pilots, and a lot continue apace, and a lot of opportunity has cultivated. There's a number of organizations that offer out-of-plan solutions now and are doing out-of-plan innovation. And the focus today will be a lot on in-plan opportunities that have come to fruition through policy change and the broader work of many. Secure 2.0 allows for a 1,000 one-time per year emergency withdrawal for unexpected family expenses. At a very high level, the money is replaced through ongoing contributions to the plan. There's no fees or penalties related to that withdrawal, and taxes only have to be paid if the money is not paid back within 3 years. So we'll spend a good bit of time, discussing this provision, but it's also important to note that there's a more traditional emergency savings sidecar provision in Secure 2.0 as well, which is shorthand referred to as PLESA, pension-linked emergency savings accounts. And at its core, at a very simple basis, it's a stable value account that lives in the plan and has the opportunity to take advantage of auto-enrollment features if available, and potentially matching features. And finally, I'd be remiss in sort of laying out this landscape if I didn't mention that there's been a couple of demonstrations within the Emergency Savings Initiative related to firms taking advantage of their after-tax in-plan account repurposing that with innovative marketing and outreach to offer that as an emergency savings tool when it makes sense for a partner. And we've seen that at UPS and AutoNation, and there are case studies available about that. So with that as sort of level setting the broader landscape, we have out of plan, we have in plan, and this real robust ecosystem that's developed around emergency savings in the workplace. I'll turn to the panelists. And Kathleen, I thought I'd start with you from the advisor perspective. How do you think about emergency savings benefits, and how do you see the 1,000 emergency withdrawal playing out among plan sponsors that you work with?
Thanks, Nick, and thank you again for including me on this very important topic. And as well, I have to give you some kudos for just making sure everyone picked up on the title of this webinar, the grand alliteration to our $1,000 withdrawal. So it's funny, as we talked about this leading up to our webinar today, I couldn't help but reflecting to when I actually got in the business 25 years ago, and we would go and do on-site employee education meetings using paper forms, oftentimes in manufacturing environments at all hours of the day, trying to help educate employees to get into the plan. And particularly those, this was, really pre-auto features, particularly those that were in that low to moderate income space, really helping them to understand how to build wealth over the long term was the primary focus. But one of the things that always came up was, well, what if I need the money? What if I commit to doing this? What if I can't get to it? What if I need it for whatever emergency comes up? How do I access the funds? And at that point in time, and really up until we've seen Secure 2.0 release the provision around being able to take the $1,000 withdrawal, the only options have been to utilize hardships and loans, which, as all of us collectively know on the call, typically have some negative implications and downside impact that sometimes are not necessarily recoverable from a participant's point of view. Where the $1,000, I think, can really fill the void is more around the psychological boost and confidence that access is there. This is really about access and meeting the employee where their needs are, which is certainly a recognition that every employee, although aspirationally wants to save for retirement, wants to take advantage of the free money and company match that their employer likely provides. The reality is they're faced with day-to-day expenses and the fear of not being able to meet those because they've committed to a long-term savings program certainly is a detractor for getting them to make that commitment. So I think this really, as we as an industry continue to experiment, I think is really a good way to look at it with the emergency savings opportunities that exist, as you said, Nick, whether they're in plan, out of plan, part of Secure, or not. It's going to be a lot of trial and error, but I think without question that what we've seen so far is that it does instill the confidence that if an employee is able to know that they can access funds, that's a valuable motivator. And I think especially for those plan sponsors that still perhaps for whatever reason have not adopted an auto feature based plan, and they look at their participation and they say, wow, I really want my participation to be higher. Certainly having this as one of the arrows in their quiver, so to speak, to be able to say to their employees, hey, look, we get it. We're right there with you. We understand that you might have a short-term need, and we're going to design the plan to be able to meet that, even though we recognize the real goal is long-term savings.
That's so powerful, the sort of psychological impact on potential participants and having the opportunity to see some sort of short-term liquidity to get to a pathway for locking money up that they might see as locking up for a future that they can't really envision yet. Tom, building off of that, how is Voya seeing emergency savings broadly as among plan participants, as well as the 1,000 emergency withdrawal today?
Yeah, sure. And actually, it just hit me when Kathleen was talking. I think before I jump into the question, I promised to answer it. I do want to go back to the beginning of Kathleen's story and just say I started in the industry almost 30 years ago as well. And as she was sharing her story, it hit me that we used to use things like salary reduction agreements to get people to try to enroll in a retirement plan to save for their future. And I don't know about you, but I think we have come a long way as an industry in helping improve and get people using auto features, using new words and new terms and reframing of terms. But we have a lot of work to do here. So that's why I'm super excited to join this discussion. So with all of that being said, we do recognize that financial strain is real, right? Participant budgets are strained. Many workers are living paycheck to paycheck, especially those with low to moderate income. And we also know from our research here that lack of adequate emergency savings actually puts retirement and that future financial security at risk. We've seen things like participants that don't have adequate emergency savings are 13 times more likely to take a hardship withdrawal from their retirement plan, 3 times more likely to take a loan, they save less. So for all of those reasons, we actually began working with Nick, you and the team at Commonwealth and through the BlackRock ESI. I think it was over 5 years ago now, time is flying, to explore solutions to help individuals build up that financial cushion so that they can prepare for those unexpected expenses. So through that research, we have done things like reframing after tax as an in-plan emergency savings solution. We have looked at out-of-plan solutions and seen some success there as well. And now we have this $1,000 provision, right? This new emergency personal expense distribution, also known as Section 115 of the Secure Act. We love to name things in interesting ways. And the way we think about it is it's another tool in that toolkit. I think Kathleen called it an arrow in the quiver. And it really, I think, does add to this ability for us to work together to figure out what are the right tools to bring to bear to employees and the plans that we're all supporting. In terms of the $1,000 emergency withdrawal provision itself, we've been kind of thinking about it as a backstop for employees in crisis mode that ultimately could help prevent more harmful, what I'll call permanent plan leakage. I hate the term leakage, but we continue to use it as an industry. So I think most everybody will know what that means. And ultimately, potentially also offer the potential of increasing retirement plan participation along the way, which we'll talk about, that a little bit deeper in a minute. I did want to just share a few statistics, though, beyond those that I shared. We did work with the team at Commonwealth and one large employer who was an early adopter of this feature. And in that employer case study, we saw that 90% of participants that use this new $1,000 emergency withdrawal option actually continued to contribute to their retirement plan, suggesting that they kind of either partially or fully have repaid the amount, they want to repay the amount. And then I would say the other statistic I would share is that 66% of participants that utilize that same $1,000 option have actually already paid it fully back. And those are people that took those $1,000 withdrawals over the first 3 quarters of last year. They've already paid it back. So, I think this underscores the effectiveness as a potential support mechanism in helping to support retirement, but then, provide that liquidity buffer to the extent that they don't have other emergency savings available.
Yeah, Tom, that's such an important point about having that buffer and avoiding even worse things that could really impact financial wellness and retirement over the long term. So building off of that, Carrie, and thinking about the larger retirement system and BlackRock's commitment to retirement security, and from where you sit, how are you seeing emergency savings play into that retirement security conversation broadly?
Yeah, Nick, thank you. And thank you all. I'm excited to be a part of this conversation today, as is BlackRock, to participate in this work overall. If you can hear in Kathleen and Tom's comments, it's really in service of the participant, of that American worker today, and how do we optimize outcomes? It's clear that emergency savings acts as a protective layer on retirement funds. Research from Voya that was conducted in partnership with the BlackRock Emergency Savings Initiative found that participants with inadequate savings were 13 times more likely to take a hardship withdrawal. So what does that mean? How many people today might be at risk of not having adequate savings? Well, listen to this. 40% of Americans do not have the ability to pay a $400 expense in an emergency situation today. That means my car breaks down, I have to get to work. My children have a medical expense I need to pay. That is a staggering statistic for all of us to take a minute to reflect on, to understand that 40% of our American workers are really under financial stress, that when we optimize that bridge for them and provide a foundation of emergency savings capability, they're exponentially more likely, 70% more likely to contribute to their retirement plan. At the core of BlackRock's mission is helping investors to have better financial futures. It's why in 2019, our firm, BlackRock, founded the Emergency Savings Initiative to do this type of work and to help individual investors have better financial futures. In fact, Larry Fink really succinctly illustrates this challenge in his 2025 letter to investors, where he says, no one invests for retirement if they're worried about paying for a flat tire or ER visit tomorrow. It's a luxury to think about tomorrow when we can't take care of our families and ourselves today, for sure. Despite the challenges, though, there are real reasons for optimism. Tom and Kathleen pointed out a few of them. Solutions exist to boost emergency savings. And the Emergency Savings Initiative, others, Nick, that you have illustrated in our opening today, working with Commonwealth, with Voya, with advisors like Kathleen, and employers like UPS and Best Buy, the results have been really impressive. We've reached over 10 million American workers and contributed to the creation of over $2 billion in new liquid savings. I think that's something for all of us to get excited about as we move forward.
That's super exciting to see that sort of cumulative picture and the power that it can have for both short-term support and the long-term retirement security. So I'll turn to the audience now for a moment, and we'll have our first poll, and would love to hear from you all related to the question, what types of unexpected emergency expenses do you see plan participants faced with? And you can check all that apply here that you might see: healthcare, rent housing, child-related, either childcare, college savings, and then elder care. So I'll give everyone a moment to complete that.
Thought you were going to sing the Jeopardy music here, Nick.
I know, right? I know, right? I should probably be humming that along. So pretty high numbers, not unexpected for a lot of these that are basically pulling on folks from unexpected, but healthcare and housing, rent, very high up there for folks seeing that quite often, and obviously child-related as well. And then about half with elder care, which kind of hits specific generations, related to needs that come up. So that's super helpful to hear from the audience, and can further frame our conversation about the unexpected things that come up. So thinking about implementing, the 1,000 emergency withdrawal, Tom, across the plan sponsors that you all work with who have adopted it, is there additional things that you're seeing more broadly? And how are you all thinking about concerns about how this might be used from a liquidity standpoint related to that dreaded leakage?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'm going to again go off script here and for a minute and just say the poll answers were interesting to me. The data that we have for hardship withdrawals at Voya shows that unreimbursed medical expenses tend to be number 2. So I think that might have been our front runner, but close behind it on the answer was housing. And preventing eviction or foreclosure, sadly, isn't the number 1 reason for taking a hardship out of a retirement plan. So I think the audience mostly got those right. Certainly all of those reasons are reasons why people unfortunately do have to tap into their retirement plans when they don't have this emergency savings buffer. So yeah, to get to your question then, what are we seeing about plan sponsors' adoption of this feature? So I'll just say the backstop is, right, we were excited about the 90 plus provisions that Secure 2.0 brought forward. Excited and a little daunting maybe as an industry to figure out which ones we're going to be leaned into more than others. I will say that the adoption of this feature started out a little bit slow, but it has picked up. We have nearly 1,000 plans now that have enabled this feature for participants. Admittedly, this still represents, I would say, a low single-digit percentage of plan sponsors adopting, but we have seen increases there, especially as we start to do more research, like we've talked about, and some other things that we'll talk about in a minute. In terms of where we see it fitting really well is where there are higher employers that have higher concentrations of low to moderate income workers, especially where there's lower retirement plan participation. We have seen this could be a new tool to help drive participation to help employees understand if you enroll in the plan, this money is not fully locked away forever. You are able to tap into it for emergencies. I think it's really helpful to think about this new feature alongside of either an in-plan or an out-of-plan emergency savings solution so that workers ultimately have an opportunity to save for emergencies before they need to tap into this feature or their retirement plan. Again, going to my comment about thinking about it as more of a backstop if other emergency savings doesn't exist. So yeah, that's what we're seeing so far in terms of adoption.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think we're starting to see that as the evolution with a lot of employers who have been on the avant-garde of emergency savings benefits, is thinking about what is my totality of that benefit, both out of plan, in plan, and so forth. Carrie, did you have any reactions to the poll, as well as how you're thinking about in the system of the retirement system, how the 1,000 emergency withdrawal might play out related to leakage?
Yeah, and even Tom's comments hit me hard about preventing eviction, right? So, the provision really integrates that emergency savings into the retirement system. It creates that bridge, as we've been discussing, and once that $1,000 is covered for employees, they can refocus on their own foundation for financial fitness and financial security ongoing. Critics have likened that to an ATM withdrawal, that $1,000. Quite frankly, it's a luxury to have access to $1,000. Our research is super clear on that, especially for low and middle income families. Research actually indicates we may even need more. But this is a terrific step forward for the industry, for policymakers to get us to this point where our hardest working Americans, under a lot of financial pressure today, can actually contribute more and feel good about adding to their retirement plan long term.
Yeah, and Nick, could I just build on Carrie's comment for a minute?
Sure.
One of the things that when we talk to sponsors and others more recently, there's a question about like, all right, is this just going to create abuse of this new feature, right? Like, are people going to tap into it when they don't need it? We're not seeing that. We're not seeing widespread abuse at all. We have seen, I would say as an industry, hardships and loans broadly are up over the last couple of quarters, but that holds true for plans that do and don't have this feature. And ultimately, we're seeing less than 1% of participants that have access to this feature using it on a year-over-year basis. But for those people that need it, it could make a really big difference, right? Like we talked about the broken water heaters, the cars, not having tires to get to work. It's certainly better than high interest rate credit card debt and some of the other alternatives that are potentially in some cases irreversible or potentially could really have a long stream damaging impact on someone's financial security. So I do want to dispel a little bit of myth here too, as we're having this discussion.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, data and what you're seeing. Kathleen, any reactions to the poll or anything you have thoughts on related to this conversation?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. I thought, with respect to the poll, obviously spot on. But the one thing that struck me, just even in the way that it was framed, and Tom, you alluded to this in the context of eviction, but rent and housing is recurring, right? This is not, the challenge here is that unless you can break the cycle, and unless you can get someone on stable footing, it's a continuous revolving door. And that's where tapping into traditional sources of loans and hardships, now all of a sudden you've got potentially a 10% penalty on top of the tax, and then you've got a loan payment now, in addition to the fact that you were trying to continue deferrals. And our industry data tells us most people maintain pretty a close deferral rate even when they do have a loan, but you're now you're struggling to just break that cycle. And rent is not something that's one and done. This is a recurring challenge, and this is why having the ability to build up savings, tap into that short-term savings when the need arises, while still continuing the long-term savings, helps to negate the negative impact of where we see taking those traditional leakage withdrawals and can make such a significant difference. I did want to also comment on one other thing that you mentioned, which was Tom, the pairing of the out of plan versus just simply the in plan. And Nick, I guess, well, first of all, before I go on, we should all be giving props to Commonwealth and BlackRock for BlackRock's funding of ESI and the $50 million plus that has been committed to take an issue that is so fundamental and important to just the overall psyche of the American worker, to have a sense of security around their financial ability to support their family, do what's right, stay on track. And, addressing this very fundamental issue around emergency savings, this is so foundational. It's so easy to take for granted, but when you look at low and moderate income workers, this is what keeps them up. And we all know the statistics around those employees that are financially stressed, that come to work, they have higher absenteeism, lower productivity, higher workers' comp claims. They're not as efficient as a worker. We all know those statistics, but how do you solve that? And you solve it by creating the financial peace of mind, if you will, and that resilience to know that I've got optionality, and it's not going out the front door of my employer and around the corner to the loan guy that's going to charge me 95% interest on taking a payday cash advance. That is not the answer. So kudos to Commonwealth and to BlackRock for everything that you're doing to really move forward this topic that should be on all of our minds as advisors, as we speak to our clients, as to how to really to change the paradigm of what is causing stress at work, as well as what can drive participation for better long-term savings outcomes. But anyway, sorry to go off our script on that too, but the one thing I did want to add is that the importance of pairing this as well with the opportunity for out-of-plan solutions. And we work with Nick on a couple of clients that are currently active in the ESI and Commonwealth's focus around emergency savings, and one of which, GXO, we've published Commonwealth published a wonderful piece on them, and there's been great information released in short order, where you've got $650,000 plus of emergency savings already happening, facilitated through the record keeper, and making it simple and easy. And so I think the proof is in the pudding. All the case studies that are going to be put into the chat that all of you on this call can download and review, it tells the story. And I think the one thing to keep in mind is this is not a cut and dry solution. There's not one way to do this. In fact, the whole idea here is that it is trial and error. And if it works, as an employer that signs on to partner with Commonwealth and ESI, the whole idea here is that you share for the greater good. You share your experience, you share what worked, you share what didn't, so that others can come behind and do the same thing. So if you as an advisor want some ideas as to how to make this happen, look at all the case studies, and they can be I think parlayed into sometimes obviously more manageable. Most of us don't have UPS and AutoNation and Delta, but it's an opportunity to really use as a blueprint.
Well, appreciate all that and the plug for all the case studies. And I really want to underscore that point. There is a lot of opportunity to do this as it works for each individual plan sponsor. And I think, Kathleen, you've shown the way on that. And Tom, you're talking about the work at Voya and the flexibility and customization you've done for folks. And I think that's really the learning agenda as well as the opportunity that many plan sponsors have. So to a more mundane point, our next poll is ready to be teed up, and this one's just a yes, no, or maybe. Do you think the 1,000 emergency withdrawal should be subject to tax withholding since it is paid back through regular ongoing contributions? So very tactical everyone loves a tax question, I think, when you're attending a webinar. So be interesting to see what folks think. Yes, no, or not sure how the taxes are handled for the 1,000 emergency withdrawal.
Nick, I want to know if you're going to walk this down to Washington after we get the answer and say, look, we should make some
Wow, 66%, 2/3 say no, and a third say they're not really sure how they're handled. That's an interesting lean towards they shouldn't be withheld from this. Kathleen, do you want to react to that and talk about how this plays out in overall financial wellness, the 1,000 emergency withdrawals you see it?
Sure. The one thing I think that as advisors and consultants that we struggle with is sometimes there's just too much, right? There's too much out there, and it's overwhelming to parse what's applicable and what's not, particularly given the vast array of needs. And if we can feel that way, imagine how our clients feel. I think one of the things that thinking through both emergency savings as a withdrawal mechanism to cover that short-term goal, and then also thinking about how to construct a broader initiative around this topic is, in most instances, there's already solutions that are present with your client, and whether it's the record keeping partner that you utilize on the plan, or whether it is their payroll provider, ADP Wisely as an example, or whether it is an opportunity to use their EAP. There are so many solutions that exist. It's just that they are not tied together. It's kind of this hub and spoke around how do you pull together what already exists, and quite frankly, what your clients are already paying for through service providers that they have partnered with in other areas. How do you kind of create it so that it's understandable, it's simple, and it's actionable for the employees? And I won't just say participants, because again, as we think about the broader context, today we're more focused on the $1,000, but really that fits into a broader context around that financial security that emergency savings, whether in plan or out of plan, can really provide. So I would say, tap into so that you have available, whether it is starting with your record keeper. So many record keepers do have payroll deduct solutions that allow for an employee to, or withdrawal solutions. If it's not an ADP as an example, but instead, the record keeper directly, but a direct withdrawal that have very low, if no fees to the participant to participate, which is also a very big, I think, topic that you should be aware of when talking about this with your clients. The fee environment has to be looked at, because if you don't pay attention, there are so many small fees that can add up when employees are forced to take small distributions or small pay advances or any number of things, and the fees can get enormous. So part of it is just helping guide your client through what is it they have available currently. What can they capitalize on that they already have in place, and how could they kind of piece it together? And I would say Nick and his team at Commonwealth are extraordinarily talented at putting the puzzle pieces together, because oftentimes it's not that your client has to go hire yet another vendor or another fintech or another solution that they have to get through procurement. That's usually not the case. It's just putting the pieces together that already exist.
Yeah, I think that's super important to call out. It's been a big learning through this journey of the Emergency Savings Initiative, is that a lot of the component parts exist throughout an organization and the payroll and benefits infrastructure already, and trying to then bring those together as an emergency savings benefit can be super powerful. Tom, any reactions to the poll on taxes, but also how you all are seeing it, emergency savings, broad brush impact overall employer plan participant financial wellness?
Yeah, so not surprised. I think we have some work to do on all of these different new tools in the toolkit, I think, in terms of like how do we optimize them down in Washington. So not that I'm wishing for Secure 3.0 anytime soon, but I do think there's something there to help us continue to improve the new tools in the toolkit. I mean, I think if we zoom out more broadly, we do think of this as a new tool in that broader plan design or benefits design toolkit. There's an increasing number of tools. We just talked about them, right? 90 plus were added as part of Secure 2.0. We've had hundreds in use for many years, more broadly in the retirement space. So for sure, the $1,000 emergency withdrawal from our perspective is not intended to quote unquote solve the emergency savings crisis that I would suggest we face broadly. But when deployed correctly for the right employee base alongside, I will say, a more sustainable emergency savings solution, whether that's in plan or out of plan, and couple that with other benefit tools that we also have at our sort of disposal in the industry, like HSAs, to help pay for healthcare expenses, which again, as I talked about earlier, that's the #2 reason for hardship withdrawals beyond the preventing eviction or foreclosure. We just see this new tool as being an effective part of an employer financial wellness ecosystem. But you do kind of have to look at the data and the individual populations, which is something that many of the peers of us in the record keeping space can help with, and then certainly working with Nick and team to figure out what is that right combination of tools that can be applied against the specific employer plan and employee audience that we're trying to solve for. So.
Yeah, I love how you frame it as like a broader ecosystem of tools and bringing that all together in one coherent sort of piece, and also naming the health savings accounts and the need for that piece of the puzzle very much tied to retirement. Carrie, any reactions to the poll, but also just lifting up to the broader retirement security sort of frame and these ongoing unexpected expenses that plan participants face? How do you see this playing out across the sort of retirement industry over the next few years?
Well, first, I think Kathleen and Tom just teed up our next webinar, is putting all of these tools together and having Commonwealth help us create a plan, a roadmap for our plan advisors to draw those out. So that'll have to be something we all circle up on after. But I would say, listen, emergency savings tools do 3 things. And frankly, they're already doing them. We see it in practice today with the 10 million American workers we're already reaching with this good work. So first, they act as that protective layer, the financial buffer to retirement savings and keeping them intact. Research clearly demonstrates that those with access to $2,000 in liquid savings with less than $2,000 are twice as likely to withdraw from their plan. We know that. Second, it encourages greater retirement contributions. Something that we're all here to do is drive better and more successful participant engagement. We can't say that enough. When our plan participants, when American workers have access to emergency savings, they are contributing more and more regularly to their plans. And then third, fostering sustainable savings habits. that is something Kathleen touched on a little bit ago, is really breaking that cycle of financial stress on a family and on an individual coming to work today. So the more that we can practice and encourage, whether it's with nudges or auto enrollment or otherwise, our workers today to be able to break that cycle of financial stress and instability, the better outcomes for everyone. So we're excited about where we are today as a start. And quite frankly, Nick, by the work that all of you are doing, Boya and others, Kathleen, leading employers who want to change the future outcomes for their workers, we're really energized by that opportunity and grateful to play a part.
That's great. And I love when there's sort of framing up of the data that we know, that we do. Like, I love that it feels like we have to repeat that a lot to folks, is there's so much data that's known that sort of sets the rationale for this whole conversation. And so, Kathleen, as you think about the broader sense of retirement security, what impacts do you think might play out around emergency savings from where you sit?
Sure. So, I think all of us on this call, as advisors and consultants in this space, we are hired to drive retirement readiness, right? That's what we are. We are retirement plan consultants. So we have to be aware of obstacles and barriers that prevent employees and participants in retirement plans from ultimately being able to achieve that objective, to get to retirement and be able to retire with dignity and certainty and on their own terms. And this is, without question, one of the biggest areas that we can help, especially impacting that low to moderate income employee. We all know this, right? I mean, we're seeing right now, moving forward, even in some proposed legislation, the encouragement of even resweeping employees into retirement plans. But we know that when an employee does do something, right, take a loan, take a hardship, something that impacts their plan, and then they get out and they stop saving, it's very difficult to get them back in, especially if there is, if they were auto-enrolled to begin with, where they didn't have to take action. So then, we've stopped that promising savings behavior because an obstacle, an emergency, prevented them from being able to stay on that path. So if we can solve for that, it is really creating that mindset around achievement. And there's nothing that when we look at, our team is fantastic, our financial coaches and education team, and they spend their days having one-on-one conversations with plan participants. And most of the time, it's not about the 401k plan. It's about all the other noise that is in the background, that is of concern, that keeps them up at night, that is distracting them from the end goal, which is using the retirement plan, which is what all of us collectively on this call are advocating for our clients, the plan sponsor, and ultimately their participants. So I do think this is, as we think about pairing it with comprehensive financial wellness, this is the first step. If you cannot get beyond this idea of creating certainty around having an avenue to tap into if the need arises for a short-term expense, then you're not going to be able to get progress on the long-term savings behavior that we all want. I think one of the things that as we as advisors enter into this discussion as well, that we should be conscious around is, again, this is not a there are so many opportunities as to how you go about doing it. It's not one size fits all. But I do think there's some things that we can help our clients with as we monitor the effectiveness of instituting any type of emergency savings, even if it's just adopting the $1,000 emergency distribution, and monitoring the number of requests, looking at plan participation rates, pre and post campaign of highlighting this as a new benefit to the plan or to the employee for participating. Looking at financial wellness survey scores, and then ultimately, measuring retirement leakage. What we know now, and as it stands today, and I think, Tom, you mentioned this, it's been relatively low adoption. Our sister company, Mercer, did a study earlier this year. I think it was looking at February and March numbers from 5 different record keepers. And adoption for the emergency savings for those with 5,000 or more employees was a little over 10%, so still pretty small. Under 1,000 employees, it was like 2%. So I think, all of us collectively as advisors, it's our job to help to be the ambassador on this on this concept and on this opportunity to, lay the groundwork, identify the risks to an employer who has, a financially unfit population, and, how do they go about fixing that? And this is certainly one way to start.
That's great. That's great. And I think that the whole framing around mindset is so important. We see time and time again with low to moderate income employees in particular, when they can save $1, $5 out of that paycheck on a regular basis, there's a mindset shift that then unlocks for those that haven't even thought about retirement savings an opportunity, because it builds a faith that there's something, to save for, and there's an easy way to do it. So we have one final poll question for the audience, and this builds off of Kathleen's point about advisors or internal stakeholders. So just wondering, if you have not discussed emergency savings with your clients or internal stakeholders, why is that? And choose all that apply. Do you worry about too much administrative work for them? Concern any of these provisions could cause more plan leakage? The timing hasn't been right. Do not really know how to access a solution. It can take time to find, review, and improve an emergency savings solution. Peers do not seem to be implementing, so it's not necessary. Or self-certification misuse concern. This is definitely fits within self-certification, but limited in terms of the amount of money. I feel like by now, Tom, I should have been able to figure out what I was going to sing or hum during this moment.
I was going to play more fun, but it's all good, Nick. I think you're good.
It's our next webinar, next one, Nick.
Well, this one's a little bit more, diversified and so forth. But if we sort of anchor around answers in the 30 to 40%, concern about the administrative work, concern the provision could cause more plan leakage. I think we hear that a lot. Time to find and review and approve solutions, peer-based decision-making, and then self-certification misuse is pretty highly ranked. So would love, before we get to questions from the audience, your all's reaction to that poll, and any final thought that you would have before we get to the audience questions. Tom, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I think we've heard all of those things from employers, advisors, consultants, intermediaries of various sorts. I think that list was pretty comprehensive in terms of most of the reasons that we hear about in terms of why not, or what some of the barriers are. I think we've disproven some of those, maybe not all. We do, especially as it relates to the $1,000, we've only had a year and a little bit, right, to really deeply study long-term behavior here. But I would suggest, we aren't seeing misuse. It's not administratively hard. Certainly there are other broader solutions and types that we could bring to bear that create a little bit more administration, but most of these things we can overcome. In terms of final thoughts, I think we've said a lot about low to moderate income workers, and that is all true, that this $1,000 emergency withdrawal provision, if there are higher concentrations of low to moderate income workers, I think it could be considered as part of a broader financial wellness toolkit, especially when paired with an emergency savings solution. And I think early signs indicate that there's some potential to positively impact retirement plan participation through some of the work we've done, Nick, with you and the team and one of our joint clients, especially when we communicate to those audiences effectively, right? It's all about communications. You really have to make sure we're getting to the right person with the right message. I don't think it's something you necessarily want to lead with, but it could be a valuable part of the broader emergency savings and financial wellness solution set. The other thing I would ask everybody to consider, both plan sponsors and advisors, is that the new emergency withdrawal provision can and you might consider coupling it with the new domestic abuse victim withdrawal provision, as well as the qualified disaster recovery distribution provision that was also given to us as new tools in the toolkit to support workers, especially those, again, earning low to moderate income and experiencing emergency expenses, to create that like comprehensive safety net alongside of some of these other tools that we've talked about. I think ultimately this is all about strengthening, the workforce, financial security and resilience. And so I do think, we're eager to continue to work with Nick, you and BlackRock ESI and all of the partners on this webinar to lean in, to learn, to research. But we do have some demonstrated success with many of these new tools that I do think we should be giving more time to in our committee meetings, in investment reviews, and certainly discussions around plan design.
Mhm.
That's great. That's great. Kathleen, reactions to the poll, and then any final thoughts before Q&A?
Sure. No, I have to say I'm not surprised at all. I think number one for us has always been, are we exacerbating a problem, creating another avenue for access when leakage is already a big enough problem? And I think the way that we need to kind of look at it, and especially now to Tom's point, it's been a little over a year. Nick, you and the team at Commonwealth have put forward some really compelling data and case studies that support really looking at this deeper. I think for many advisors, quite frankly, coming out of this passage of Secure 2.0 and having, so many different provisions that, we were trying to educate our clients around and understand what was applicable and what wasn't, and what was required and what wasn't, and the timing, and all of it became a challenge. I think now we're at a great point in time where you can step back and you can make this truly an initiative, which is what we're doing. We create a topic of interest every quarter for our clients that's very narrow, that's actionable, that looks to them for purposes of really digging deep on a topic. And this is a perfect one to do. We've had a year plus, we've got some great anecdotal evidence that this makes a difference and it matters. And we know, all of us, Carrie, you started with that quote that I think probably everyone on this call has regurgitated at some point in time about the $400 and 40% of Americans that can't come up with it. And we all know that to be the case. So let's do what we can to solve it. And the first step is low-hanging fruit. This is one of them, right? This is one of the things, without creating, an ecosystem of an emergency savings program for your client. Start with something small, something that you can measure, something that you can then learn from, and then pivot off of to move accordingly and solve the problem. So I think this is a great topic to just hone in on. And to Tom's point, certainly there are a couple of companion distributions that can certainly accompany this. And I think it's now's the time. We've got a little bit of a reprieve in terms of topics to talk about that are actionable, other than we know Roth catch up coming and all of those things. But fit it in between now and the end of the year, make it a priority, and gather some data. All you need is in the chat that is getting sent out in terms of the white papers and what the BlackRock studies have been. You can easily put something together that's really quite compelling, and make it a priority for one of your next plan review meetings.
That's super. That's super. I think it's just, as you say, just get started. Measuring, so important, and learning and seeing what works for employees and how it's interacting with retirement. Carrie, any final thoughts or reactions to the poll before we get to Q&A?
Yeah, I think, Kathleen mentioned the pieces that are being shared by the Commonwealth team. Those pieces are excellent. They are PDFs. There are a full report there for all of you to take, whether You prefer the one pager on just the quick hits of what this means and how do you do it, or if you want all of that research, it is available to you that our team has put together into long form. If you have questions, further questions, please reach out to your BlackRock counterpart or colleague that you know. If you don't know one, please let me know. That's a problem too. But the second part of that is I just want to say thank you. It is a real honor to be here on behalf of my firm, who has done this great work, people far before me in this role, who dreamt of making this happen, our founders who believe so dearly in the financial outcomes being improved for people really around the world today. We take that very, very seriously at our firm. And it's an honor to share this time with you. And then thank you for your partnership. The plan advisors who are here today, Kathleen, Tom, Nick, yourself, you're the change makers. You're the ones making this happen. You know, it's one thing for provisions to be passed and BlackRock to found a savings initiative, but if each of you aren't taking this to your plans and having these conversations, challenging static thinking, then nothing really changes for that American family today who's in real need of these provisions. So we've so much gratitude for all of the good work you're doing. If you don't have what you need, we will get it to you. We'll figure out how to create a solution or the research to provide more comfort in bringing these forward. So thank you.
That's great, and I really love the point about changing the status quo. So I'll just say quickly, it's been a pleasure to spend this hour with the three of you, leaders in this space, driving the change and doing what's important with a focus on helping shore up retirement security and financial wellness through emergency savings. And I'll turn it over to Rebecca with Q&A with our last.
Thanks, everybody. That was a good discussion. I appreciate it. I want to remind everyone that there's a link and some downloadable documents in the chat feature. In the few minutes we have left, I want to ask one question that's addressing one of the concerns that was in the last poll was about misusing self-certification, but another concern that plan sponsors and their advisors are having is how to make sure that participants don't go over the $1,000 limit and the 1-year limit on these distributions, especially if they're working in a controlled group or affiliated service group. So does anyone have thoughts about how to help plan sponsors ensure that limits are not exceeded?
Well, I know from a record keeper perspective, we're making sure that the $1,000 is not exceeded when we have the data and the plans, that we have a full rich data set about those participants. I know that there's some plan design that can get tricky where there's multiple plans, record kept across different providers. I'm not the expert on how that gets handled. I can just tell you we do, where we have the data, enforce the rules, if you will, related to the $1,000 and the 1 per year limit.
Anyone else? So there's a technical question here about the withdrawal provision. So you said that the withdrawal is not taxable to the participant if they repay it. Can they repay it via payroll deduction, or do they have to pay it from outside funds?
Yeah, either way. So some of the stats I shared earlier, around 66% of people have already repaid it fully where they took it out during the first 3 quarters of last year. The vast majority of those people are repaying it through regular payroll deduction. It's why we're seeing that 90% continue to make contributions, which is effectively repaying it back. So this is again where it's quite a bit different than like a hardship, which is really an irreversible decision that it doesn't have the same capability to actually be paid back through payroll deduction, as an example.
And also different from a loan, which initiates a new payment. This is not a new payment.
Correct. Good point.
Yeah, I like to use the term replacement because of the ability to use the ongoing contribution. So if you pull 500 out and you just keep contributing, then it's going to come all back and be replaced. So in some world, it could be visualized as a bucket, not that it will be, but it could just be visualized as a bucket that sits within the overall visual of what the total assets look like. And you know at any given time how that bucket is refilling and if you've pulled any money out of the bucket. But that's another way to sort of think about it in my bird brain.
All right, thank you. So that's really all the time we have. I want to thank you again for a great discussion, and thank you to everyone who's attended, and we will see you in the next webinar.
Thank you.
Everyone.